It was one of those bright, crisp mornings that feel like everything is perfectly set up to unfold just as it should. I opened the spillway gates of Harrow Lake at 6:07 a.m., watching as the water began to recede, 1 inch every 12 minutes. I had planned this moment for 2 years. Every detail had been carefully calculated, and now, the long wait was almost over. The stage was set for Vivian Marsh, the president of Ridgehurst HOA, to cut the ribbon for the grand opening of the public park they had built on my land. Vivian was there, standing proudly before a crowd of 314 people, including a county commissioner, a regional news crew, and many others who had come to celebrate what they believed was a gift to the community. I watched as she made her speech, thanking the county for the $45,000 beautification grant and claiming that the lake had always belonged to the community. She spoke confidently, as though the lake and everything around it were truly part of the public domain. The words came so naturally to her that no one in the crowd questioned them. It was a perfect moment for her, the culmination of a project she had spent 2 years organizing, planning, and promoting. But what Vivian didn't know, what no one knew, was that while the ribbon was being cut and the cameras were rolling, the real story was already unfolding. As soon as those scissors snapped shut, I turned the valve on my spillway, unleashing the water that had been carefully held back for so long. The water level began to drop, just as I had planned. It didn't take long before the crowd started noticing something strange. The boat launch that had been freshly poured and beautifully constructed was now sitting half submerged in the mud. The shoreline, which had once been covered by water, was quickly being exposed. Picnic tables nearest the waterline were starting to flood, and the boat launch ramp was no longer meeting the lake at its intended level. I watched through my binoculars from my porch, keeping a steady eye on the scene as it played out in front of me. 2 years ago, I had received a planning notice from Ridgehurst HOA describing their intention to build a public park along the northern shoreline of Harrow Lake. The notice was vague, but after a quick read by my property attorney, it became clear the easement they were citing, the 1991 public access easement, allowed for limited recreational use of the shoreline, such as walking and fishing in the afternoons. What it didn't authorize was the construction of a $340,000 park. Vivian Marsh and the HOA had grossly overstepped their legal boundaries, and I knew this from the start. But instead of confronting them right away, I chose to wait. I decided to let them build, let them celebrate, let them believe they had won, because I knew that eventually the truth would be revealed in a way that would be undeniable. The law, after all, doesn't bend for anyone. My water rights were protected, and I knew the more they built, the stronger my case would become. And on that day, the grand opening of what they called the Harrow Lake Public Recreation Area, I was ready to prove it. As Vivian stood before the ribbon, thanking everyone, I was calmly watching the waterline recede, knowing the moment of truth was coming. It was one of those quiet victories where no one else was aware of what was really happening, but I could see it, the water slowly pulling back from the shore, exposing the truth, just as I had planned. Within 15 minutes, the waterline had already receded so much that it was visible to everyone. The boat launch ramp was sitting awkwardly on exposed mud. The picnic tables were now submerged in water, and the walking trail, which was supposed to be pristine, was being left high and dry. I didn't have to say a word. Everything I needed to say was being said by the lake itself, as it revealed the folly of what Vivian had built without any legal basis. The crowd started to notice. First, it was the people standing closest to the water. They began pointing, whispering to each other. "The water level is dropping," they murmured, unsure of what was happening. Then, as more people looked, the confusion spread. There was no immediate panic, just an uncomfortable realization. Something was wrong, and everyone could sense it. And then came the process server. A man in a gray jacket moved through the crowd with a quiet purpose. He wasn't there to celebrate. He was there to deliver a message. He approached Vivian, who was still standing near the pavilion, overwhelmed by the celebration around her. He handed her a manila envelope, and without a word, she took it from him. As she opened the envelope and began to read the legal complaint inside, the camera continued to roll. Vivian, who had been smiling so confidently just moments before, now stood frozen. I could see her face change as she realized what was in that envelope. The simple, undeniable truth had arrived. The complaint, 47 pages long, laid out every single violation of my property rights, every misrepresentation made by the HOA in their grant applications, press releases, and social media posts. It outlined in detail how Vivian and her team had built a public park on my private shoreline without my consent, violating the terms of the easement. It was a legal attack, but more importantly, it was a public one. Everyone watching, the 314 people in the crowd, would now understand that the park they were celebrating wasn't just built on the wrong side of the law. It was built on a lie. Vivian's reaction was one of disbelief. She looked up from the complaint, her face pale, realizing that everything she had worked for, everything she had built, was now in jeopardy. Her reputation, her career as the president of the HOA, her entire legacy were all on the line. But she wasn't the only one facing consequences. The county would soon find out that they had been misled, that $45,000 had been allocated to a project that was fundamentally illegal, and the media would cover it. The story would spread like wildfire, and Vivian's carefully curated narrative would collapse under the weight of the truth. It wasn't just about winning a legal battle. It was about exposing the truth, about standing up to a system that thought it could bypass the law with enough power, money, and media manipulation. In the end, the water did what words couldn't. It showed the world exactly what was happening. The shoreline receded, and with it, Vivian's carefully constructed reality. What followed was a series of legal proceedings, public backlash, and eventually, Vivian's resignation from her position as president of the HOA. The county revoked the $45,000 grant, and an attorney general's inquiry was launched into the entire project. Vivian was left to face the legal consequences of her actions, and the HOA was forced to reckon with the fact that they had overstepped their bounds. The lesson here is simple. Truth cannot be hidden forever. It has a way of emerging, of revealing itself when the time is right. And when it doesn't just change the course of one person's life. It can change an entire community's understanding of what is right and wrong. The truth I held quietly for 2 years was revealed by something as simple as the water level in a lake. Vivian's ambition and disregard for the law could not stand against the undeniable force of truth. And so, the question remains, when does the law serve justice, and when does power and privilege distort it? Was it right for Vivian to take such risks in the name of progress? And when is it the right time to stand up, speak out, and let the truth be known? What would you have done in my shoes? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Share your own experiences with power, justice, and the consequences of actions that seem to be above the law. What is the right way to handle such situations? And how far should someone go to fight for what is legally and morally theirs?